Do you ever wonder what gross domestic product or GDP means and why it's such an important economic indicator? In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what GDP is and why it's a great measure of a nation's economic performance. Hi there, this is Simply Economics. In order to help us create more fantastic videos, consider subscribing. Be sure to hit the notification bell too. GDP is a term often mentioned in the news and taught in economics classes. However, comprehending its significance can be perplexing, even for experienced economists. Let's explore this concept further. What is gross domestic product or GDP? Gross domestic product or GDP is the total value of goods and services produced within a country in a specific time period. As a measure of overall domestic production, it serves as a comprehensive scorecard of a country's economic health. GDP is typically calculated annually, but it can also be computed quarterly. In the United States, the government provides both quarterly and annual estimates of GDP to track economic performance. History of GDP. The concept of GDP, first proposed in 1937, became widely adopted as the standard measure of national economies after the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. However, critics argue that GDP fails to capture important factors such as health, happiness, and social progress. Despite this, many still view GDP as an absolute indicator of economic success, believing that an increase in GDP leads to a decrease in unemployment. What are the types of gross domestic product? GDP can be reported in various ways, each providing slightly different information. Nominal GDP. Nominal GDP measures economic production using current prices, without adjusting for inflation. It includes all goods and services valued at their actual selling prices. Real GDP, on the other hand, adjusts for inflation and is used to compare output across different years. Real GDP. Real GDP is a measure that reflects an economy's production of goods and services over time, accounting for inflation. It helps separate the impact of rising prices from the actual output trend. Economists use this measure to compare an economy's GDP from one year to another, adjusting for changes in market value. Real GDP can reveal significant inflation or deflation in an economy. GDP per capita. GDP per capita is a measure of economic output or income per person in a country. It reflects average productivity and living standards. Per capita GDP provides insights into individual economic production value and overall national wealth. Factors like technology advancements and special resources can impact per capita GDP growth. GDP Growth Rate. The GDP growth rate measures the rate at which a country's economic output is expanding. It is commonly expressed as a percentage and is an important indicator for economic policymakers, as it is closely linked to key policy targets like inflation and unemployment rates. How is GDP measured? GDP can be calculated using three main methods: the production approach, the expenditure approach, and the income approach. When correctly calculated, all three methods should produce the same figure. The production approach. The production approach calculates the value added at each stage of production by subtracting the value of intermediate inputs. This approach considers the final product and the value it adds to the production process. For instance, flour is an intermediate input for bread production, while an architect's services are an intermediate input for building construction. The expenditure approach. The expenditure approach calculates the total value of purchases made by final users, including households, companies, governments, and foreigners. It encompasses consumption, investments, and purchases of goods and services. This approach helps us understand overall economic activity and its impact on different sectors. The income approach. The approach calculates the total income generated from production, including employee compensation and the operating surplus of companies. The revised content aims to enhance readability and convey the original meaning more eloquently through refined word choice and sentence structure. Comparing GDP, GNP, and GNI. GDP and gross national product or GNP are commonly used metrics to measure a country's economic growth. GDP focuses on economic activity within a country's borders, while GNP considers the overall production of native individuals or corporations, regardless of location. Gross national income or GNI, similar to GNP, measures all income earned by a country's citizens, regardless of where the economic activity occurs. GNI provides insight into the overall economic well-being of a nation. Which country has the highest GDP? The United States and China are the two countries with the highest GDPs worldwide. However, the ranking varies depending on the method of GDP measurement. When considering nominal GDP, The United States takes the lead with a staggering $20.89 trillion in 2022, compared to China's $14.72 trillion. Is a high GDP good? A high GDP is often seen as positive due to increased economic opportunities and material well-being. However, it's crucial to consider other factors. For instance, a country with a high GDP but low per capita GDP may have wealth concentrated among a few individuals. To address this, the Human Development Index can be used alongside GDP for a more comprehensive understanding of economic development. The bottom line: GDP aids policymakers and central banks in assessing economic growth, contraction, and potential risks such as recession or inflation. Despite its imperfections, GDP has evolved to effectively measure industry activity and intangible assets. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future content. We truly appreciate your support. See you in the next one.